You may have seen a lot of people gathering signatures in different Trader Joe's and Walmart and all the places that you may shop. And this is it's the Justice for Tenants Act that they're trying to get onto the ballot for 2024. And this would be to repeal all of a sudden I'm blanking on everything, Costa-Hawkins. And so anyway, we're going to get into that and then also get an update on the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association's lawsuit to overturn ULA. And so we're going to talk about these two different things today. Before we get started, AOA, we've been around for over 40 years. We're the largest individually organized group of apartment owners here in the state of California. And our goal really is to help you be successful with your real estate investment. And we do that by giving you the information that you need, the forms, tenant screening, and of course we have the LA trade show that's coming up here, and we want to invite all of you to come to that. And yeah, admission's free. You don't even have to be a member. If you're not a member, actually we'll give you a free 6-month membership if you've never been a member before. And anyway, so that'll be a great time. And just Barbara may or may not be watching. She left us a review on Yelp this morning. So thoughtful. We didn't prompt this or anything. And she said, I've been a member of AOA for several years now. My experience has been very positive. The advisors are knowledgeable and very helpful. If you own rental property, I would highly recommend becoming a member. As new laws, county and city regulations and established, the AOA keeps informed quickly. As a family-owned rental property, we appreciate the information the AOA provides. So thanks, Barbara, for just leaving us a comment there on the Yelp. We appreciate it. And anyway, so we're going to get into this. Like we shared, we have the trade show that's coming up on April 19th. If you register online, it's a breeze to register when you're walking through, so sign up online for sure. Next week we will be talking about earthquake insurance, so you'll want to watch that live stream. And also we just had one with Dennis Block about the LA City. So specifically, if you're in LA City, we had just what the new requirements are there, and so you could check that one out if you go to AOA USA and just search that on YouTube and we'll come up. And then soon we'll get that in the member portal, those things. And anyway, here we go. We're going to get started, and we really want to promote Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. They're dedicated to the protection of Prop 13 and the advancement of taxpayers' rights, including the right to limited taxation, the right to vote on tax increases, and the right to economical, equitable, and efficient use of taxpayer dollars. And so this really aligns with who we are. And our speaker today is the Vice President of Communications for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. She's a columnist, and we would see her articles and like, wow, that's a perfect article for the AOA magazine. And so we got to know her through those things, and she spends a lot of time on the radio. She actually is the host for the Howard Jarvis podcast on ABC, and you'll find her all over the place. And what I appreciate about her is just the common sense and and her passion to fight for property rights, for less government, and just what we know. And so anyway, here we have the Just Cause for Renters Act that's trying to repeal Costa-Hawkins. I want to introduce our speaker today. It's Susan Shelley. So let's go ahead and have her come on. So have this a lot of the I'm thrown off here. Okay, Susan, are you there? Can you hear me?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. There we go. Now we're there. All right. So we have this law, this proposed act. It's justice for tenants, and it's anything but justice, right? Mm-hmm. And what they're trying to do is saying how they're trying to repeal Costa-Hawkins. A lot of people here may not know what Costa-Hawkins is. A lot of people have benefited from it, but may not know. But then a lot of you who do know what it is, that's actually why you're here, because you know how important it is for us as rental property owners. It's a California state law that was passed in 1995, and it sets limits on local rent control policies. And specifically, it prohibits cities and counties from implementing rent control on units built after February 1st, 1995, and on single-family homes and condominiums. It also allows landlords to raise the rent to market rate after someone moves out, and that's a policy known as vacancy decontrol. So you can imagine if you were being a real nice guy and you let someone rent your property at way below market rate, and then all of a sudden, if these laws pass and a certain city or county were to enact this and remove that vacancy decontrol, then just imagine you would be stuck at that lower level. So this is a huge deal, and I think it could really be very complicating for us. And anyway, so Susan, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. What do you think are some ways that this might impact the housing market and renters and owners in general?
Well, one of the biggest things when you do something like this in state law, excuse me, when you do something like this in state law, it has an effect on what people anticipate will happen. So if you repeal Costa-Hawkins, which, by the way, this is their third attempt to do that with an initiative, and the first two failed, obviously. But if you repeal Costa-Hawkins, then it's potentially possible that local city councils will enact radical rent control. Building an apartment or buying an apartment, that comes with a mortgage, that comes with a long-term commitment. All of these things are going to factor into the decisions for lenders, for the decisions for buyers, for the decisions for sellers. If you live in an area and people are running for city council who are radical rent control advocates, it's going to affect every potential business deal, and buildings will not happen. There will not be new investment. There will not be new construction, because even though the rent control law may not even exist yet in Berkeley or wherever, it's going to affect the decision making. The potential that there's an election coming up will affect lender decisions. So this is very destabilizing for the rental housing market. And like all rent control activities, it can only result in less housing, which pushes up prices for tenants, supply and demand. So it's very destructive. It's obviously destructive for people who currently own buildings, because if radical rent control is enacted and you lose vacancy decontrol, how do you pay your bills? How do you pay your rising insurance bills, your rising financing costs, your rising costs just in general for everything with inflation? Because rent control is not allowing people to even keep up with inflation. And the landlords are being portrayed as the bad guys. And this has to stop, because housing is a business. And if it's not a business, what are we expecting the government to do? Are we expecting the government to tax people and build housing that they then assign based on an application that people fill out, and they'll decide who gets an apartment? Does that sound like something perhaps out of the Soviet Union? How many children do you have? How many bedrooms do you need? Well, we don't think you need that many bedrooms, or we don't think you need to be in a different location, or we don't accept your application for affordable housing that the government has provided. How in the world is that supposed to work? If you don't have a thriving private sector in housing, then what you have is a disaster in housing. And that just can't be allowed to happen. You can't have a situation where everybody who's in is in and everybody who's out is out of luck. And rent control does that. If you're in an apartment that's rent control is great. You're never going to leave. But your landlord is subsidizing you. And in many cases, the tenant can be making more money than the landlord is. The landlord is subsidizing someone with a high salary who maybe didn't have a high salary when they first came in, but now they do, and they're not leaving that apartment in Santa Monica or West LA or wherever. Why would they? Why would they move out of a rent-controlled apartment near the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood? Why would they? Just because they're now doing very well financially. So it's a problem. It's a bigger and bigger problem the more of it that you do. And when you take away Costa-Hawkins, you're taking away a limited protection for landlords against the potential of radical rent control in the cities all over the state. You're taking away that statewide protection for property owners, and it has to be stopped. So I encourage you to contribute to the campaign to stop it, to get out there and tell your friends and relatives, email your list, tell everybody that so-called justice for renters is not something they should sign. It's going to be on the streets. They have 6 months to collect signatures. I have the numbers here. Their deadline is August 28th. They need 546,651 valid signatures of registered voters. And they're going to stand out in front of supermarkets. They're going to have paid signature gatherers who will stand out in the rain. Don't sign it. Tell everybody, don't sign it. It's just poison for the housing market. And it's going to be expensive to defeat it, but it has to be defeated. And we'll all be working on that. If you're not already a member of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, please join and stay on top of these issues. Before they come and stab you in the back, you'll know about them. So go to hjta.org, hjta.org, and sign up to be a member of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. So that's justice for renters, repealing the Costa-Hawkins Act from 1995.
Great. Yeah, and I like those points that you made. You know, the fact that with rent control, it's indiscriminate of your income. So there's a lot of people that make a whole lot of money that are being protected by it, and it's just totally unneeded. If you even were to agree that rent control was a good thing, and we don't think it's a good thing ever. And if another thing that you mentioned was just how the government, for them to build housing and how it becomes like the Soviet Union and these things. And, there's a management term, and you've probably heard of it, Susan, but it's RPRS. Right person, right seat. Okay. And so when you get the government, as soon as the government touches it, immediately we're talking prevailing wages, we're talking bureaucracy, we're talking they got to pay all kinds of lawyers' fees, and then we're talking corruption, unfortunately. Right. And so when all of that happens, there's nothing affordable about their affordable housing. Right. The only existing affordable housing that's out there today is what our members or other property owners here in the state of California provide that's below market rate. That's the only real affordable housing there is. That's true. One other point that I want to make for our members here is that, you have the direction that the government is wanting to go is to buy your properties and give it to a nonprofit, or have a nonprofit buy it and have a nonprofit run it. And there's a Skid Row Trust is one that's been around for over 20 years. They have 2,000 units that they're managing, and they're running negative 14 million every year. So they're losing about $7,000 per unit every single year, because as soon as those people touch it, there's no way it can be affordable. You and I, what do we work for? We're working for equity in the property. You could never hire. It would be unlawful to hire somebody to work for what we work for on these properties. That's and we're working for a future hope, something in the future, but that's not how either whether it's state-run or whether it's run by a nonprofit, that's not how it works. And it's incredibly inefficient. They own properties, and there's units that are sitting there totally vacant. And whose fault is that? That's mismanagement. That's not what our people do. A regular property management company or rental property owner. It's a business, and they're in business to rent that out, to pay the equity down, but to have a profit because they want to leave a legacy for their kids.
Exactly.
And so these are things that, you know, we have to realize how important it is, how bad rent control is for us just in general. And I know that you may only own multifamily, and this may not even impact you because you're LA RSO, you're in Oakland and you have rent control. And so you may be like, well, what's the big deal? But we have to not let them take this from the people who do have just a few units. And so anyway, we really, really encourage you. And do you know right now, I'm sure this is on the radar for Howard Jarvis. Do you know what they're planning on doing, or by chance, or they're just forming the plan right now?
The plan for which?
For fighting this justice.
Oh, for fighting this justice. Well, I think the plan is the same as it was before. You just go on the air, on radio, and in articles and in earned media, and you just keep explaining that this destroys the rental housing business in California. It flat out destroys it. It ends new investment. As I said, the threat of what might happen has an effect even if it hasn't happened. Something the activists don't really acknowledge. They say, oh, well, this didn't happen. There's no evidence that this happened. It's the possibility that it could, which enters into these long-term business decisions, that is so destructive to the housing market. Just having it on the ballot is probably an effect. Mm-hmm. And having it pass would be so much worse. Something that affects all of these housing programs that the government is doing is a law that was passed in 2016, which was SB 1380. And this is the housing first requirement. So all of these so-called affordable or homeless housing projects that the nonprofits are managing are prohibited from excluding anyone from tenancy based on drug and alcohol addiction or various other problems. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you're managing 2,000 units and 40% of them are occupied by people who have severe drug and alcohol problems, that's chaos for the whole building. So this is state law. These nonprofits don't even have a choice when they're managing a building like this. That's not sustainable. No. That's not a sustainable situation. That's just a formula for failure. And failure is what we have in our homeless policy in California. At the time that this law was signed, there were probably 50,000 fewer homeless people in the statewide count than there are now. So it's a 7-year failed experiment in social engineering, in trying to be nice and not being protective of the people who are doing the right thing. They're being protective of people who are doing what ends up being the wrong thing for themselves and others. And they don't protect people who are doing the right thing, who become victimized by people doing the wrong thing in these buildings. And it's chaos. So that law has to go, SB 1380. That needs to be repealed, certainly reformed or looked at. It needs to be debated in the legislature whether this is an outcome that they expected for this supposed reform. I think it's a disaster.
Yeah. And, the other thing, when you mentioned this whole Soviet Union thing, I don't know if you know, but I lived in communist countries for a while, over a decade.
I didn't know
So in East Asia. And, what I saw, what you don't really realize is that it's not just that they're pooling all the money together and it's inefficient. You end up getting those that are in and those that are out, like you mentioned. And, physically, you mentioned the in and out, but then there's also, are you in the Communist Party or not? Or what we would see here, we may not have a Communist Party, but are you in a position to have a favor with whoever is pulling the trigger, or a better way to say is accepting people? And, people don't really realize that type of corruption, the stuff that happened in New York, where they're money under the table to get, put up higher on that waiting list and everything. So again, there's a lot of reasons why it's bad. We do have an article coming out. One of the questions here is, do you have literature to educate the voters to defeat this measure? And how do we get it? We have an article coming out. There's a lot of articles about rent control, and there's a lot of studies about it. And, Lee, on YouTube there for sure. we should kind of put everything in one area so that you have a lot of different resources to work from. And I think that would be for everybody, just as this ramps up for sure.
Yeah, we'll get some stuff out there for you. We'll have it. We'll have it for you.
And then there's another one. If rent control has been proven bad for tenants, I'll let you answer this one. How come most California city councils are for it?
It has to do with voters. It has to do with how many voters are tenants versus how many voters are landlords. And it has to do with short-term thinking. And it's really unfortunate, because when a problem is man-made, the solution is man-made. And yet they're going in the wrong direction. They're doing more of the poison that's killing the market. And they can do very well politically with that. Activists are, you've probably seen the Los Angeles City Council with activists screaming profanities at the city council over the most moderate type of enforcement of basic health and safety laws on the sidewalk, keeping encampments away from schools. People were screaming obscenities. There are a lot of activists out there, and many of these city councils throughout California have to deal with this ferocious political pressure not to enforce basic health and safety laws and to crack down on so-called abuses by landlords and make life more miserable for landlords until everybody just gets out of the business. And, in Los Angeles, we have Measure ULA. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so Measure ULA was an initiative that came to us from the people who will benefit from the initiative. It was sponsored by people who wanted to raise taxes and direct the money to themselves. So they are nonprofit housing developers and nonprofit associations that get these contracts to manage the buildings. And they put a tax on the ballot. They called it a mansion tax, but it actually is an apartment building tax because it's only on the value of the deal, not on the type of real estate property. So any property that has a selling price between $5 million and $10 million is taxed at 4%, regardless of whether it's profitable, not profitable. This is not a capital gains tax on the sale, and it's not taxed above the threshold of $5 million. It's taxed from the first dollar. So if it sells between $5 million and $10 million, that's a 4% sales tax on that real estate transfer. Above $10 million, it's 5.5%. So the money is supposed to go to this housing fund to build affordable housing. And this was the key part, I think, tenant protection services, tenant advocacy. So they're going to pay for essentially going to court to block evictions from people who are not paying their rent or people who have other problems that they're causing in violation of their lease. So this is very sticky. This is just more harassment of business owners in Southern California. And it's going to have an effect, it's already having an effect on real estate deals that are falling through, developments that are not going to happen, that no longer pencil out because of this tax, and it's going to cause problems down the road. However, the good news is it's an unconstitutional tax, and it's going to be probably declared invalid. It's being challenged by two lawsuits, one from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and the lawsuit is asserting that because the state constitution, Proposition 13, added this to the state constitution, real estate transfer taxes are prohibited. You can't have one at all. Now, in the 1990s, Prop 13 passed in 1978, but activist judges have been hacking at it ever since. So in the 1990s, judges carved out an exception for transfer taxes by a charter city, not a general law city, but a city that has essentially its own constitution, a charter city, if the tax is for a general purpose. So there are transfer taxes on the books. There's one in LA County. I think there's one in San Francisco. There are transfer taxes on the books, but they have to be used for a general purpose only. Measure ULA is a transfer tax for a special purpose. The money is dedicated and restricted to being spent on affordable housing projects and these nonprofits that manage the tenant services and all the rest. That's unconstitutional. There was a decision in the Supreme Court in California in 2017 called the Upland case. It was California Cannabis Coalition versus City of Upland. And it had nothing to do with housing, but it sort of suggested, it hinted that if a tax increase was put on the ballot by a citizens' initiative, it was all different. It didn't have to comply with the various constitutional rules, including a 2/3 vote for a special purpose. So the proponents of ULA think that because of appellate court decisions based on that interpretation, this is going to be upheld. Where we think they're wrong is that the city charter of Los Angeles says that the initiative power cannot exceed what the city council itself can do. That's different than in Santa Monica and other cities that have done real estate transfer taxes. So because the city charter has said that since like 1903, since before there even was a statewide initiative power, we think that that Upland decision with the loophole does not apply. And that because the state constitution says no real estate transfer taxes, you can't do the city council can't do it, and the voters can't do it by initiative. And so that's why the lawsuit contends that the tax is invalid, and hopefully it will be invalidated. Meanwhile, the city of Los Angeles will start collecting it on April 1st. Anybody who pays that tax after April 1st must file a claim for refund. And that form is on the HJTA website. Because
claim for refund.
Claim for refund. If it's invalidated at any point, you will get your money back for that Measure ULA tax. But you must file a claim in order to do that, and you must file it within 1 year of paying the tax. So if you're selling something after April 1st and it's hit with that tax, be sure to go to the HJTA website. In fact, I'll send the form to you, Jeff, and you can put it on your website too. You want to make sure that you file a claim for refund with the city of Los Angeles, and then at whatever point, however long it takes to go through the courts, if it's invalidated, you'll get a refund.
Great. Thanks for that. And to weaponize the courts to just feed attorneys all kinds of money to do that, it's incredible that, and that in itself right there is where they will lose, I believe, because they have that carved out. Now, if it were a general fund that went to housing providers and tenants all at the same time, then maybe not, but probably not. But even then, so it's crazy what they're trying to do.
It's crazy to raise taxes by initiative, in my opinion. If you want to cut taxes by initiative, I'm fine with that. But if you want to raise taxes for certain people and then direct the money to other people, and you want to do that by initiative with a simple majority vote, I just think that's not really going to end well for anybody.
Right. So we're looking forward. On timeline on that, do you have any timeline on when that's going to be? We were optimistic that we might be able to get it stopped before it goes into effect, but that's not going to happen because there are two different lawsuits and the judge has to consolidate them, and that just takes longer. So the next hearing is in May, and then we don't really know what the timeline will be. But we're hopeful that a strong enough decision comes out of the district court that the city of Los Angeles will, at the very least, put the funds in escrow and not spend the money and not be irresponsible about it. We're hoping that happens. Yeah, that'd be great. And then there's the legislation to repeal the death tax.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
This is really very good news. You might remember that last year we tried with signatures to get a repeal the death tax measure on the 22 ballot. And we came up short. We got about 400,000 signatures. We needed more than that. Limited time. However, the same measure is now introduced in the legislature as Senate Constitutional Amendment 4. So here's what that would do. We used to have in California a constitutional right to pass property from parents to children without having that considered a change of ownership, whereby the property is reassessed and the taxes go up. Between parents and children, you could transfer a home of any value and up to $1 million of assessed value of other property without reassessment. And now that right is gone. And it's gone because Proposition 19 in 2022 removed it from the Constitution. And it did that while everybody thought that Prop 19 was about wildfire victims and seniors moving to a new house and taking their old tax bill with them, which it was, but it was also this. And we think the voters did not fully understand that was, we know they didn't. We know a lot of lawmakers didn't fully understand what the effect would be. And the effect on affordable housing of Prop 19 is very significant because all these mom and pop buildings, everything that's family owned, when the ownership generation passes and the property goes to the next generation, it will be reassessed to market value. Yikes. In California, with the inflation and the property values what they are. Yikes. Reassessed to market value, the new tax bill is 1% of the current market value at the time of transfer. And how do you recoup that? Everybody's under rent control, and it's an older building, everybody's under rent control. How do you recoup that? You can't. So what's going to happen? The kids will sell the property. And the new owner will not retain it as rental housing because they can't make it pencil out either. So it's going to be demolished and it's going to be something else. Proposition 19 could wipe out half the affordable housing in California in one generation. We can't have that. We have to repeal that death tax that's in Prop 19. So SCA 4, Senate Constitutional Amendment 4, will do that. Now, initially we thought that the legislature would not be very interested in this. You know, we thought we'd give it a try because they can put it on the ballot March 5th, 2024. With a 2/3 vote of each house, that can be on the ballot next March, which would be great. So we thought we'd try. And we didn't expect much because they love tax increases and they're not fond of tax cuts. We have been surprised. There is a tremendous amount of support across both parties. We're hearing it quietly. We can't reveal names yet. But we are hearing that because of the effect on generational wealth in every community, when the sale of property is forced by tax increases and people fall off that economic ladder, they no longer have that asset that's producing income for the family. They have the cash from the one-time sale, but the cash is losing value to inflation and the asset is appreciating and somebody else owns it. And in a lot of communities, that's not popular. That's not going over very well. So there's a lot of support. And as a matter of fact, when this parent-child transfer exclusion was initially put forward in 1986, it was the legislature that did it. And they passed it unanimously. Unanimously. And it went on the ballot and it passed with 75% of the vote. And now it's gone. We're going to put it back. If we can't get it through the legislature, we will look at an initiative. We're working on developing a one-page initiative that people can print at home. And we think that's a game changer because it's very expensive to collect signatures when you have to hire people to go stand in the rain with a clipboard. But if people can click an email link, download a fully legal petition, fill it out, sign it, mail it back to us, we think we can do this. We think that's a game changer. So that's the plan. You know, we're going to try to get the legislature to see exactly how damaging Prop 19 has been and to understand why it has to be changed. And if they do, great. And if they don't, we're right behind them with a petition. So that's what's happening. You can go to repealthedeathtax.com and we'll keep you up to date there. Or you can go to hjta.com. We'll keep you up to date. Sign up for the free email alerts. We'll let you know. And meanwhile, call your lawmakers, call your representatives, and tell them how important it is to fix Prop 19, how important it is to co-author, not just support, but co-author SCA 4 and show your constituents that you get this, that you understand how damaging this is to families who have worked for 30 years to pay off property, and now the family's going to lose it. It's not right. So SCA 4, you can find your contact information for your representatives if you don't already have it. findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov. findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov. You just type in your address, up it comes. Give them a call and ask them to co-author SCA 4.
There we go. It's not a Republican thing. It's both parties that will support that. So that it's common sense stuff again. Brian on YouTube, if the death tax were repealed, is there a claim for refund that can be filed to get the higher property tax paid back?
No. Unfortunately,
so.
Unfortunately, a tax that's legal at the time, you can't get a refund. But what we will do is we will make sure you get your original Prop 13 limited assessment back again. So if you've been reassessed for a parent-child transfer, you will get your original assessment back, trended, with the maximum of 2% per year, whenever that is. So that reassessment will go away. And going forward, you will have the lower taxes. But it's not legally possible to claw back the extra taxes that were paid during the period of time that the tax was legal. That's the trouble with that.
Okay, here Armando, he's asking, how about the Taxpayer Protection Accountability Act? What about that?
That's very important. As we were talking about, the activist courts have been hacking at Prop 13 ever since the vote was certified in 1978. They have been hacking at Prop 13. And the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and other groups have been very active in passing new initiatives like Prop 218 in 1996 to close the different loopholes that have been opened. Well, the latest loophole is this Upland decision, which says that if a tax increase is put on the ballot by a citizen's initiative, it doesn't need 2/3. It doesn't have to comply with any of the pesky constitutional requirements. The Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act closes that loophole. And it says local taxes for a special purpose must get a 2/3 vote of the electorate, no matter how they get on the ballot, no matter how. And it closes that loophole. It also includes a really important taxpayer protection at the state level. Currently, it takes a 2/3 vote of each house of the legislature to pass a new tax or raise an old one. This would add a layer of taxpayer protection by requiring that after it gets its 2/3 vote and the governor signs it, it must go on the ballot for voter approval. That's a big deal. And it also cleans up some of these ballot label issues where people are not always telling you what it's a tax increase, and it's called the We Love Puppies Act, and it doesn't say it's a tax increase. It's going to have to say it's a tax increase. So a few things like that, cleaning up some of these loopholes that the courts have created. It's very important. That has already qualified for the November 2024 ballot. That will be there. So tell everybody to support the Taxpayer Protection Act. And you can find a fact sheet about that on our website at righttovoteontaxes.com. Righttovoteontaxes.com.
Great. Yeah, most of the time it's just no on everything. But that's
that's a good one.
This is one of those cases where, you need to, because when you're saying no on all those initiatives, most of them are taxes, extra new taxes, and we love to just tax ourselves for some crazy reason here. But so it's usually just no. But on that one,
make an exception.
What we need to make an exception on. That's right. All right. Here's Shirley on YouTube. Is only the portion of real estate value owned by the deceased person subjected to the death tax if the estate is survivorship jointly owned with the child?
I believe so. I believe there would be a fractional reassessment. So if 50% of the property changes ownership, then 50% of the property would be reassessed.
And we do have the AOA trade show coming up. Thank you for speaking last time. It was so great to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And there will be a tax specialist expert. So you will want to go to the trade show and hear him speak from Robert Hall and Associates. So that'll be a great one. Lots of great speakers this time around. And so definitely want to invite you to go if you're in the area. And if you are not a AOA member, you will get a free 6-month membership. Gosh, Susan, maybe you're not a rental property owner. I don't know. Do you own rental property by chance?
I do not. No, I'm a homeowner.
You could have still got a free membership when you were in there last time.
I should have. I might join anyway.
Right. And anyway, if you're not a member, you are welcome to go. And anyway, thank you again, Susan, for coming on and just touching on some of these things so that our members are aware and we can support Howard Jarvis and then also the AOA Political Action Committee on some of these things as well. But definitely donate to Howard Jarvis, Taxpayers Association. And lots of times we work together with them for different things. And so We support them too. Even the AOA PAC does. So.
Well, we support you because you do great work for property owners, and it's really important because property ownership is fundamental to freedom. This is not just any kind of business here. Property ownership that's one of your fundamental rights. Going back to English law before the U.S. Constitution was even written, property ownership is the foundation of freedom. And if you let the government infringe on it over and over again, you're not just losing your property rights, you're losing your freedom. And we can't have that in America. We have to defend the foundation of freedom.
Right. And, you touched on that. It just reminded me, we have an article coming out and we have a quote from a Swedish economist. Now, let me read this. Assar Lindbeck, a Swedish economist who chaired the Nobel Prize Committee for many years, once reportedly declared that rent control is the best way to destroy a city other than bombing.
There you go. And it's true. It's true.
Yeah, it really is true, folks.
You just lose those buildings, they get demolished, and they're gone.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
We'll see you next time.
Great to be with you. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.